Hello everyone, welcome to this Idle Game Maker tutorial lesson in which I'll explain how to implement a functional Ascension mechanic into your idle game. So here we have what it will look like at the end. Let's just buy a few of these filler buildings, a few of these upgrades as well. And here we can see a few of the resources that we will need. I set this Ascension system to be able to ascend when you have 1 trillion cash. So let's get to 1 trillion. There we go, we should be at 1 trillion, and there we go. Now here is our Ascension upgrade, which once we buy, we will ascend and gain some Ascension resources. So notice also that in the description of this upgrade, we have dynamic information that tells you how much of the prestige resource you will earn if you ascend right now, and how much more of your main resource you need for more of that prestige resource. So let's click ascend. Notice how everything reset, including our cash, and we got 1 penultimate cash, which in this case is our prestige resource. And also notice how our cash yield from this button here that doesn't have an icon yet is actually 10 times bigger because of this prestige resource. So let's buy our cooker upgrade, and we are gaining 1.1 trillion per click, which means if we ascend now, we could get 2 more. And again, we're getting 31. Now when we buy this, we're getting 3.1 trillion. So yeah, it also boosts your production. And yeah, let's get into it. So before we actually begin coding, there are a few things we need to plan out first, such as which buildings, upgrades, or resources you want to lose and which ones you don't. And you do this by tagging things that can be lost. Now, next thing you want to think about is in what way will your Ascension system scale. For example, in Cookie Clicker, the scaling is exponential. So think about how you want your system to scale, if you want an exponential scaling system or linear scaling system or anything in between. For this tutorial, we'll be using an exponential scaling system that is very similar to Cookie Clicker, with the only difference being that in Cookie Clicker, the cookie requirement for more prestige resources is based off your total amount of cookies earned and not just this Ascension. And in this tutorial, the requirement will be based off resources you earned this Ascension and not all time earned resources. Also, for a little bit of advice, this tutorial is a little more complicated than the other ones I have made so far, so it would help you to at least know the basics of Idle Game Maker already, so that you can build on this system and change it to your liking, as well as implement it without any flaws to an already existing game. Now, with that said, let's move on to coding. So, first things first, as with every Idle Game Maker game, let's start by writing let's make a game. So let's make a game. There we go. And also let's add a settings section with the big blue style sheet, so that it looks a little nicer. Oops, stuff slash big blue.css. There we go. Next up, let's add a button. So let's just call this rest button. And also our main resource, which in my case will be cash. So there we go. Let's have the rest button also yield you, let's say 1 trillion cash, so that we can test this properly. There we go. Okay, next up we are going to need 2 more resources. Well, actually 3 more. So the first resource we'll need is our Ascension resource. So let's just name that Ascension Rest. I'll name it in my case penultimate cash. All right. The next resource we are going to need is some sort of counter for how much cash we earned this Ascension. So let's name this resource cash earned now. Give it a name, cash earned now. And in order to add functionality to this, we need to write it like this. So cash earned minus cash left behind, which we will also create as our 4th resource, cash left behind. So now let's explain a few things. So cash earned now works in such a way that it's always your total amount of cash earned minus the cash you left behind when you ascended, right? and cache left behind will add functionality to it later in our Ascent upgrade, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So this will always keep track of how much money you earned this Ascension. Okay, I also forgot to mention that it might be of interest to hide the Ascension resource unless it's hidden 0. So you just write in hidden when 0. This is so that the player doesn't see it until they have actually earned some of it, so that it can come as a sort of pleasant surprise for them. Okay, let's just quickly check if everything works. So I've already copied this link into here. There we go. Let's see if it works. Alright, everything loaded up. I believe it works just fine. So we have cash 8 trillion. Here we go. Now we have earned 1 trillion, and cash earned now is also 1 trillion. Alright, well, everything works as expected. We can continue. Okay, now with our main resources added, we can add a few filler upgrades for this game. You probably already have some upgrades in your game, so just bear with me. I'll just add them here, and also buildings, so that I can show off the functionality of the Ascension later on. So let's just name these filler upgrades. Filler upgrade 1. Let's have 5 of them. Whoops, 4, 5. There we go. Let's also have some filler buildings. So filler building 1, filler building 2, filler building 3. There we go. We don't need them to cost anything. Let's just pretend that for now these are some buildings in an already existing game. They already have functionality, including these buildings, and this is really just to show off that we will lose them once we ascend. Okay, next up, make sure to tag buildings, upgrades, and resources you want to lose upon ascending. Now you can tag them however you want, but in my case the things that are losable will just be tagged losable. So let's get into it. Let's have the cache, give it a tag losable. Ascension res, we do not want to lose that. We don't want to lose cache now because, well, it already has this is always thing here, and cache left behind, we won't really need to lose that either. Now these filler upgrades we do want to lose, so in my case let's just give them all a template with the tag losable, and also of course buildings as well. So give them a template, which means all of these buildings will just be tagged losable automatically, including these upgrades. Okay, let's now check that everything works. Click refresh. We have our buildings here, okay, and our upgrades as well. Okay, we can now actually implement our Ascension upgrade, star of this video. Okay, so let's get into implementing the Ascension upgrade. Let's just name it Ascension. Give it a name. Whoops, I don't know why Pastebin is doing that, but anyways, let's give it a name. Ascent. God, this is really annoying. Okay, hold on. Let's give it a description. So, ascend to a higher state of being and gain penultimate cache. Okay, we'll add dynamic information later. For now, let's just add basic functionality. So, we're gonna need 3 unearned commands. So the first one will yield us cache earned now amount of cache left behind, and this is so that when we ascend we know how much cache we left behind when we ascended, right? Because we're gonna lose our cache, and this is gonna be pretty useful later. So let's now do unearn. Also, of course, the system to give us the Ascension resources. So in my case, let's just pull up Paint right now. In Cookie Clicker, it's kind of this formula, right? So square root of 3 with n divided by 10 to the power of 12, so 1 trillion, right, basically. Now, this n in Cookie Clicker is the amount of cookies you earned all time, right? So throughout all ascensions, and this is going to be the difference in our tutorial here. N is not going to be the all-time amount of cache we earned, but instead it's going to be the amount of cache we earned this ascension. So the way we do this is with a simple math expression. We gotta floor it, and unfortunately Idle Game Maker doesn't have roots built in, but we can use a little bit of math to our advantage because it does have powers. And if you know a little bit of high school math, I believe it is, you would know that some kind of x to the power of 1/3 is basically the same as the cubed root of x. So we're going to use that to our advantage here. So let's add our brackets. We're gonna divide cash earned now divided by 1 trillion. I believe this should work. 1e12. This is basically 1 with 12 zeros after it, and to the power of 1/3. So this is basically how the power effect works in Idle Game Maker, right? You have a number to some kind of power, in our case 1/3, and we can just have that be our Ascension res. So this will yield us this amount of Ascension resource, basically this formula right here that I have mentioned. Now our third honor command will need to be the thing where we, well, lose everything. So we lose everything tagged losable, and this is why you should tag everything that you want to lose with the losable tag, because otherwise you would just lose some things you maybe don't want to lose. Alright, so I have saved my code, and let's test out if it actually works. So let's hit refresh, let's buy a few filler buildings, let's buy all the filler upgrades, and let's get our cash to 1 trillion. And the way our system scales is that at 1 trillion we should get 1 penultimate cash, at 8 trillion we should get 2 penultimate cash, at 27 trillion we should get 3, and so on and so forth. So right now when we click ascend, everything should be lost and we should gain 1 penultimate cash. So let's see if it works. There we go, it works. We got everything is lost, including the buildings, the upgrades as well, and we got 1 penultimate cash. We also got a counter for how much cash we left behind. However, I believe there is actually a bug here, and that happens when we click the ascend button really quickly. So just to demonstrate this, I have activated an auto clicker as well. So let's click the ascend button really quickly. Oh, whoops, yeah, okay. So when you click it really quickly, it actually activates multiple times, right? And for some reason our cash earned now is at 2 trillion. So I believe the reason why this happens is because we didn't actually add the losable tag to our cash earned now resource, and this is always has a, I believe, like maybe a half a second, maybe a second delay. So for 1 second you can basically click this ascend button as much as you like, and you can ascend as many times as you like in that time frame. So the simple fix is to just add the losable tag to it. I know I said we didn't need it there, turns out I was wrong, unfortunately, but yeah, just add a losable tag to it and I believe that should fix it. So let's wipe our save, let's hit refresh, let's hit it one more time just in case. Okay, let's buy everything as well, buy everything, get our cash to 1 trillion. Now let's click it really quickly. I'll activate my auto clicker, and yeah, it doesn't happen anymore. So we clicked it really fast, but we only gain 1 penultimate cash. So with that bug fixed, we can move on to adding dynamic information to our description. Alright, so let's get to adding our dynamic information. So let's first add some information in the description that will tell you how much penultimate cash you will earn if you ascend right now. So let's add a new line with this symbol here. Let's add a bit of flavor text. So ascending now will grant you, and let's make the next part bold so it's a bit more visible. And this is actually where we are going to be adding our dynamic information. So with these brackets you can basically use a mathematical expression to express some kind of number in the description, or to display some kind of number, some kind of variable number. So this is going to be pretty simple. You just copy and paste this expression that I have mentioned previously and also explained in here. Ascending now will grant you this much penultimate cash. Right, let's see if it works. Let's hit refresh, let's wipe our save, Okay, so now we're gonna get 0. When we get to 1 trillion, we should get 1. Yep, and when we get to 8 trillion, we should get 2. Okay, yep, we get 2. Let's click Ascend, and we got 2 penultimate cash. Let's get to 1 trillion again. We get 1, right? Let's get to 8 trillion again, and we get 2 again. Now, just to make sure it's not bugged, let's for example ascend with 6 trillion cash, and we should still only get 1 as it says here. Alright, yep, we only got 1, so it works pretty well. Let's now add dynamic information that will tell us how much cash we need to earn for the next penultimate cash. Adding dynamic information that displays how much cash you need to get more penultimate cash is going to be a little bit more complicated, because we're going to need to sort of slightly reverse engineer this formula for scaling that we have here. So, since this is a floor function or an expression, right? This will always be an integer because we are rounding it down to the nearest integer. So for example, if this is equal to, I don't know, 1.9, right? It will just equal to 1 because we are flooring it. That means we are running it down. But if it's 2.1, it'll equal 2. So this will always be an integer. Well, what does this exactly mean? Well, that means there are values at which this expression goes up by 1, and in order to find those values, there is also a formula for that. So it follows this formula right here. So basically x to the power of 3 times 10 to the power of 12, which is just 1 trillion, is equal to, well, some kind of integer, or in this case our amount of penultimate cash, right? So n is penultimate cash. Now, this means if we get 1 to the power of 3 times 1 trillion, we get 1 penultimate cash. So if we have this much cash, we're gonna get this much penultimate cash, or our prestige resource, which means this is 8 trillion. At 8 trillion we are gonna get 2 penultimate cash, and at 27 trillion we are gonna get 3 penultimate cash. So how does this information actually help us? Well, if you notice here, we have 1 penultimate cash here, and this is just 1 cubed times 1 trillion. So we can kind of use this to our advantage by plugging this number here, right? Or this number here, or this number here. This can be our n, right? So we just plug this right here, and then we cube that, right? So to the power of 3, and we time that by 1 trillion. And the good thing about this is that we actually already have a formula for this number right here, right? Or this number, or this number. And it's this one right here. So this expression, this cube root expression here. So we are going to use that to our advantage. But we first need a new resource. Let's call it n. And let's have this always be our formula right here. But since this is going to be the amount of cash we need, this has to be 1 integer higher than it usually would be. So for example, if this is 0, right, like if we would ascend right now, we would get 0 penultimate cash. But our information needs to display how much cash we need, so this kind of has to equal what it would equal plus 1. So it would equal this, but we need to get another bracket here, I think, so 1 plus. Okay, now this n is going to be important because we are going to need to cube this n so that we know the next value in this sequence, right? So for example, let's say we got this amount of cash, right? We got 27 trillion cash. Well, the information has to display 4 to the power of 3 times 1 trillion, and we need to subtract the cash you earned now from this. So cash earned now, right? The cash earned now, you will subtract that from this, and that will basically show you your information about how much cash you need for the next penultimate cache. So how we go about doing this? Well, let's add a new line. You need, here we go, let's make this bold as well. So you need n times n times n. We could also use the power effect, but then, you know, it would get pretty confusing, and this is pretty simpler. This is a lot easier to read. So we get n times n times n times 1 trillion. Alright, so this is basically our x to the power of 3, so basically just x times x times x, and then times 1 trillion. So times 1 trillion, but of course we have to subtract cash earned now from this. Alright, so you need that much cash to 4 plus 1 penultimate cache, and let's also make this bold so it's a bit more visible. Alright, hopefully this works. Let's save our changes, and whoops, alright, what happened here? Okay, I see. I believe we need an extra bracket here. Okay, that should fix it, hopefully. There we go. Okay, so you need 1 trillion cache for plus 1 penultimate cache. Yep. You need 7 trillion cache, or, well, just so this makes more sense, let's write here, you need to earn that much more cache in this ascension for plus 1 penultimate cache. That should hopefully make more sense. Yep, you need to earn 1 trillion more cache. Oh, whoops, I accidentally wrote this twice. Cache, this ascension, there we go. Save changes. And yeah, you need to earn 1 trillion more cache. So let's earn 1 trillion cache. There we go. Now we need to earn 7 trillion more, 6 trillion more, 5 trillion more, and so on. Let's get to 8 trillion. There we go. Now we need to earn 19 trillion more cache for the next penultimate cache. So we have 8 trillion, 8 plus 19 is 27. Let's get to 27 trillion. Go. It should say we need 2 trillion more. Yup. So let's get 2 trillion more, 27. There we go. And now we get 3 penultimate cache. We need to earn 37 more, so we need 64 trillion cache. But yeah, the system works. Hopefully how I explained it makes sense. If not, feel free to rewind, maybe watch it multiple times. If you are still confused, I'll try to help you maybe in the comments. We are basically almost finished. We just need to add a little bit more functionality by making the penultimate cache actually give us some production boosts. So let's get into implementing that right now. Okay, so now all we need to do is to make our Ascension resource boost our production, and a simple way to do this is to have an upgrade that you always own, right, as soon as you start up the game, and then have that upgrade passively increase or multiply your production by the amount of the Ascension resources that you own. So let's just get into it. If you want to implement the system into an already existing game, you probably want to boost your buildings as well as your buttons. So you're probably going to have to tag your buildings and have this multiply the tag of your boostable buildings by a certain amount that you set. But in my case, I just have a button, so it's going to be pretty simple. So let's just name this upgrade Ascension Boosting, and let's create some space because this is space bin is acting up. But let's add a passive effect which multiplies the yield of my button, so res button, by 1 plus 10 times Ascension res. Now this 1 plus here is just so that we don't multiply by 0, because then, well, it would kind of halt our production, wouldn't it? So let's have this be owned, and let's also have it be always hidden. There we go, and this should work, hopefully. We are going to own it right from the beginning. When we hit refresh, it's not going to show here since it's hidden. Now let's get some penultimate cash so that we can see the boost. Alright, now, so we were getting 1 trillion. Right now we should get 10 times that, or well, 10 times that plus 1. So we should get 11 trillion cash right now. Yep, there we go, and it works. It boosts our production quite a lot. Let's get 4 more. And yeah, we're getting an absolute load of cash just from our penultimate cash right here. So it's boosting our production, it's deleting our progress, and yeah, it's basically functional. We are pretty much finished. Only thing we have to do now is to hide these resources, since in your game you probably don't want the player to know how much cash they left behind unless you want to show it in some kind of different way. Maybe you have a statistics screen. We obviously don't want to show this N, and cash earned now is probably pretty useless to show as well. So let's hide those. Cash earned now, always hidden. And let's just add this to everything, always hidden. And add this to N as well, always hidden. Okay, and that should pretty much be it. Let's save our changes, look at our finished product. There we go. So all the clutter is gone. We're getting a lot of cash from our penultimate cash as well. Let's ascend, get 10 more, get even more cash, and this is just going to be an infinite loop. Alright, so one more thing I feel is important to mention is to remember that this Ascension boosting upgrade that is hidden and owned from the start should not have the losable tag, because well, if you lose it, it's never going to boost anything. Now, one more thing to mention is that this is really just a template, right? If you are going to implement it to your game, to an already existing game, it's gonna probably be a little bit more complicated and you're gonna have to do a little more stuff on your own. But since this is also a template, you can really customize it or expand upon it however you like. For example, you can maybe add some upgrades that cost Ascension resources, right? You can have multiple of these systems, so you can ascend multiple different ways. You know, possibilities are truly endless. Hopefully you create some pretty amazing stuff with this. I haven't really seen many idle game maker games utilize this system as much as I hoped. So yeah, hopefully this at least guided you in the right direction so you feel a bit less confused. If you still do feel confused, however, feel free to ask a question in the comments, the Reddit, or even the Discord. I will try my best to answer every single one. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson, and if you really like what I do here, you can check out my Patreon linked in the description. For only $2 a month, I can shout you out at the end of my videos, and it would also make me really happy and extremely motivated. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and see you later.